Overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away. Drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do. 'Cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men, north the rich men. I wish politicians would look out for miners, and not just miners on an island somewhere. Lord, we got folks in the street, ain't got nothing to eat, and the obese milking welfare. Well, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds. Young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground, 'cause all this damn country does is keep on kicking them down. Lord, it's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do. 'Cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men, north the rich men. I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay.
You are listening to This Week in Clown World with Ben and Hobbs, so sit back, relax, take your black pill, and enjoy the show.
Well, good evening, fellow harmful extremists. I hope you enjoyed the new Blue Collar Anthem. That's a song that's been blowing up lately all over the place. B over here in the chat was the one that introduced me to it, and yeah, I think he dropped it like a couple of days ago, and the guy went from like 4,000 followers to over 250,000 in the last couple of days. So, yeah, the guy's name's Oliver Anthony. He's probably going to be something big in the bluegrass country scene, so go show him some love. I particularly like that because it really hits you right in the feels.
Strikes a bit of a chord, huh?
Yes, it does. I believe the term is relatable.
He cared about miners, and not just miners on an island. That was the best line.
Yes. Hey, Trevor. Good evening, friend. Yeah, so lots happened. We didn't have a show last week because County Fair was in town here where I'm at, and I decided to do some stuff with the family, and lots of stuff happens. And the thing about these busy news weeks, especially when we're doing a 2-weeker, is that so much happens that it just burns you out, right? So we were over in the pregame chat, and you're just like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm just like, I don't know. But there's been plenty of stuff that goes on. So tonight, second half, we're going to pull Simon in. He's been following the things going on over in West Africa.
Which is probably the biggest thing, honestly.
Yeah, which is saying a lot considering that it looks like our Alzheimer-stricken president is has definitive proof of his corruption, and we're on the brink of total nuclear annihilation with the other nuclear power in the world, and the end of the world is going to get kicked off in Western Africa, of all places.
Who would have thunk?
Yeah, who would have thought that the United States would get wrapped up in another quagmire war in a former French colony again?
I know. The irony of that is just thick.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every time that happened, I'd have 10 cents, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
When that first started happening, I sent that comment to you, and you're like, "Oh God, which one?" And it just, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and that one certainly rhymes a lot.
Yes, it does, and it all rhymes with.
But we'll hit that with Simon because it is too complex for me to follow, and it's so hard to sift through the news on it. This comment. We're this close to see Biden trying to say Niger on live television.
I
can't wait.
That will be the excuse that they use to swoop somebody like Gavin Newsom and Michelle Obama in. Like, oh, the dementia, we can overlook that. Oh, the corruption, we can overlook that. Oh, the FARA violations, we can overlook that. The crackhead son with way more influence than he needs to, we can overlook that. But say the N-word on live TV, and it's like, nope, you're out, off to the farm with you. Bye, Grandpa.
There's so much stuff coming out on Biden. It's just, does it even matter I mean, what else could they possibly have on him at this point that would make the situation worse?
You know what? If they had, I'm convinced. Well, okay, let's back up a little bit. Remember when Donald Trump was first campaigning back in like 2015, 2016, and he made that offhand comment about like, I could gun a man down on Manhattan Avenue and nobody would care, or my supporters wouldn't care. I have a feeling that is exactly what would happen if they had video of Biden taking a big comically large sack of money with a dollar sign on it, or, you know, like just flat out saying like, oh, hey, thanks for the bribe, Jack. I'll get you whatever you want, or anything. You know,
sniffing cocaine off some Burisma executives' dicks. I mean,
yeah, and they just, oh, well, context matters. Context matters. It's like, okay.
I mean, the big one I saw today was the photo of whatever Air Force One or Two on their way to Ukraine, and it had the energy secretary. I forget his name. It was Stein something, surprisingly. And this, I mean, they were able to link it up. This guy just emailed Hunter like the day before about stuff, because what they've said is like, all right, Ukraine is working with Hunter. He doesn't have any influence on anything. Joe Biden doesn't have any influence on anything. He's just a vice president. Here's Joe Biden on the airplane with the energy secretary, who had just been talking to Hunter the day before about Burisma.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to connect any dots there. They line up. I mean, it's the same dot.
Yeah, exactly. There's like the 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon game that you used to play, and this is just like, right. Oh yeah, Kevin Bacon was in Footloose, and Joe Biden is on the take. So yeah, there we go. That's
And then there was the Devin Archer. Did you watch the Tucker Carlson and Devin Archer stuff?
Yeah, I watched quite a bit of it. It's I mean, obviously it's some he said she said stuff, but get that guy under oath. Threat of perjury. Mm-hmm. That's really all you need to do. And Harrison Smith said something today on InfoWars that at some point you're going to have to demand justice, because what this is like right now is it's like you have a murder trial, and you have the suspect that you have the proof that he did it. And rather than ask for a judgment or ask the jury to go away and deliberate, you just keep calling witnesses. over and over and over again. The evidence is stacking up. It's like, okay, we're gonna call another witness, but you're free to go until we get the next witness, until we get and it's just like, at what point is it airtight enough that you can just do something about it? And I thought about it for a little bit, and it's not that they're calling these witnesses as because I have my Republicans are cowards and Democrats are insane because they're all on the same side type of thing. That's still my working theory. But I think that what's going on right now is just a case of people living in glass houses not wanting to throw stones. Mm-hmm. They don't want to dig up anything on the Bidens because they're in on it too. Ukraine has been a money laundering pit for both political parties for decades. It's like, if we dig up anything on the Bidens, my name is going to be on a list somewhere. That's why the only people that you see doing anything about it are these freshman congressmen, the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Lauren Boeberts and Madison Cawthorn before he got ousted out of there. They're the only ones that are doing anything about it because they're the only ones who haven't been in Washington long enough to have any shit on their resume. The Kevin McCarthy's aren't going to do anything about it.
Right. Do the new circuit court ruling Hunter can't be charged for the gun crime? I didn't see that. That's a new one to me.
Yeah. There was another thing saying that drug users can't be barred from their Second Amendment rights or something like that. I haven't looked into it totally, but yeah, that came out. So, but
fine. Let them all apply it equally then.
Yeah, exactly. Let everybody else out. Speaking of people not being charged for crimes, one of the big ones that came out was a civil case between Andy Ngo and Rose City Antifa. You didn't know much about this before we got started, did you?
No, I didn't catch this one, so this is all you.
Right. So Andy Ngo, he's that independent journalist who
a white supremacist,
obviously an Asian white supremacist. I think he lives in Great Britain now. He moved out of the country because he was getting so many death threats. But he was covering a lot of the Portland riots over there in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Seattle, all of that stuff. And when he was covering one of them, somebody recognized him in the crowd. They chased him down. They threw milkshakes on him. They beat the shit out of him. And so he sued, and it went to trial. And in a case of jury nullification gone haywire, the Portland jury ruled against him. Now, it was a civil suit, Andy Ngo versus Rose City Antifa, and it's pretty slam dunk. There's video evidence, witness testimony, just about everything that you could possibly need to prove that an independent journalist was accosted in the commission of his job. And jury came back and found Rose City Antifa not liable. Now, what makes it most egregious is the fact that before the jury was dismissed for deliberations, the defense attorney looked at them and said, "I am Antifa, and I will remember the results of this trial." Now, if that isn't threatening the jury, if that's not jury tampering, then what the fuck is? I'm speechless. It's ridiculous.
Portland. I've seen a couple of news stories out of Portland. All the people moving out. I saw one about some lady in downtown Portland that got beat up by a homeless man, and she realized how bad the situation was, and her comment was, "We did this to ourselves."
Yeah.
Portland doesn't have a way to turn it around at this point. They've lost they need more cops. They've lost too much of their tax base, so they can't get more cops. Mm-hmm. And all that's left is the people that are part of the Antifa defund the police who would never vote for more cops anyways. And you're seeing the death of a city right there.
Yeah, and that comment there that we did it to ourselves, that's something that Bongino's been saying over the past 3 or 4 days. Is he's saying he's been going on this for a while now. He's like, how bad do things have to get before things turn around? And he's like, it has to get bad. Are we there yet? No. He's like, you'll know that we're there when progressives start sounding like conservatives. You have what you just said there about how we did it to ourselves. You've got the people in places like Massachusetts and Chicago and New York that are getting flooded with these illegal migrants that are being bussed up there by border state governors are saying, like, wait a minute, hold on. When we said we were a sanctuary city, that was just a virtue signal. We didn't mean it.
Right.
We're a sanctuary city until it actually, comes time for the rubber to meet the road. And then it's like, whoa, hold on. We don't have the infrastructure to match this. And the border towns are going like, yeah, welcome to the party, man.
Yeah, Sanema, did you see her comments on that when New York asked for federal money and she pretty much said, oh, hell the fuck no, you better not get that money.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got some gal from San Francisco who, I don't know how true it is, it's obviously just hearsay, but some gal from San Francisco said she was walking down the street and some guy was walking towards her and he said, get out of my way, you stupid bitch. And she's like, excuse me. And he spit in her face and said, if you don't move, I'll rape you. And you got other people saying that they don't feel safe in their cities. And it's like, yeah, yes, this is what you voted for. This is the adage of, if you want to dissuade people from this sort of behavior, give it to them good and hard until they learn their lesson. And this is just the natural cycle of politics, it seems like, where you have an affluent society that begins to decay, and then they don't know what to do, and then you have to kind of put the brakes on the tolerant freedom, which isn't really freedom. It's more just like, tolerance, I guess. But you have to pump the brakes on that and clamp down hard until you have to clamp down hard with a legal framework until the societal framework catches up and it can police itself. And then you can take those back off. You know you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. I don't know that it's possible. I mean, this isn't a situation that's ever happened before. This homeless thing with all the drugs and violence going on. I can't think of a historical situation where you would have that in place. There hasn't been a framework laid where that could happen.
Well, I hate to keep going back to him because it just feels like I'm just rehashing his show. But, again, Bongino brings up what happened to New York City in the 90s before Giuliani became the mayor of New York City.
Well, that was just absolute mayhem, though. I mean, it wasn't a homeless thing.
It's kind of the same thing, kind of. But yeah, they had David Dinkins, who was the mayor, and he instituted all of those progressive policies. And then Giuliani ran for mayor, and he lost. And the people were like, God, how bad does it have to get? And then the next year there was 2,000 murders or something. And then the next year there was 2,500. And that was how bad it had to get. And they ousted Dinkins. They put in Giuliani. Giuliani cracked down with what was called broken windows policing. And things turned around. And he term limited out and got New York City all the way up through 9/11. And then they instituted Bloomberg, who, while a progressive, he was still kind of a law and order progressive. And then after that is when things started spiraling back down. So it'll be interesting to see who comes in after this Eric Andrews guy, who seems to be a Dinkins level of incompetence running New York City.
Wasn't this guy a former cop, though, too?
He was. Yeah, he was. He was like a police commissioner, but it seems he's kind of a Nepo baby. Or maybe diversity hire. type of, yeah. So I mean, just because he's a cop doesn't necessarily mean he was a law and order type of guy.
I don't know. I don't see how they can fit. I mean, they've created such a culture of how shitty the cops are. I mean, I don't think you had that in the 80s, the hatred of the police. Um, I I don't know enough about New York situation. I mean, I've seen some documentaries on what it was like, but I didn't see the causes. I mean, it was like Gotham City level,
Yeah, yeah,
just people gunning down on trains, and I don't know if it's just because they didn't have enough cops, but it'd be interesting to look into that so you could draw a comparison between what's going on today.
yeah, yeah. But the problem is
And
that back.
nationwide, though, I mean, go ahead.
No, oh yeah, I was gonna say that's the thing. Back then it was New York City. Now it's practically every major city in the country is like that.
Right. The New York City was a shithole, but nationwide, at the federal level, they weren't on board with whatever New York City was doing. Also, this at this stage, you have a federal government that agrees with the policies that all these cities are doing to turn themselves into shitholes.
Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, it's a political virtue signal that you have all of these politicians, and I don't know if they have good intentions or if they're just naive. Maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe they're genuinely evil. Maybe there's a
Mhm.
mix of everything going on there. Maybe there's the deliberate dismantling of the country, that destroying the institutions by discrediting the institutions first, which is my long-standing theory about why they're doing the things that they do that make absolutely no sense at all. But I guess it will remain to be seen.
Well, and I think it's just millennials are so terrible. I mean, the boomer progressives set this up, but the millennial progressives are just so terrible. I think it's incompetence. They took the brainwashing that was fed on them by the boomers and applied it to their cities, and it's just completely tanked them.
Well, that's the great thing about the federal system that we have in this country, is that you have 50 individual laboratories of liberty that, as long as we don't institute things at the national level, people can and are seeing that this type of governance doesn't work, and that's why they're fleeing to places like Texas and Florida and Tennessee. It's the U-Haul index is clearly in one direction.
Well, and it's so weird. I mean, I don't know what the path. Somebody's got to bail them out eventually. I mean, if these cities start going bankrupt, then the states have to bake them out, and then it rolls uphill to the federal level, and then we all pay for it. I'm curious to see how that's going to play out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll see how it goes.
But I mean, speaking of how, did you want to hit on the mansion news? You saw that one. Speaking of
We can
busted
ask.
Democrats.
Well, we can ask Simon about that, because I had no idea that it happened. He's the one that told me. I guess Joe Manchin is going independent. Which
Yeah, his comment was that the Democrat brand is broken, but he said the Republican brand is also broken, which I would agree with.
Yeah.
He doesn't really fit in either party, kind of like how Sanema didn't. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm saying her name right. I can never remember.
Yeah,
And
Kirsten
it'd be
Sinema.
great to see it. Yeah, it'd be great to see a little independent block start to form. Who knows if they can get reelected, though? That's the problem.
Yeah, I don't know. Joe Manchin is a big enough name that I think he's not going to have much of a problem with it. Even if he's bad mouthing the Democrat Party in West Virginia, I think that he was elected on policy positions, not party positions. So I don't think it's going to matter as much to him. Somebody like Tulsi Gabbard in Hawaii, arch progressive state of Hawaii, I think that going independent was ultimately, if she would try to get reelected there, she's badmouthed the Democrat Party so much that I think that the dyed-in-the-wool Democrats of of Hawaii would turn her down. Cinema's another wild card, just like Manchin. Depending on policy positions, but I don't know.
I mean, Arizona's a solidly purple state still. Manchin's from, I mean, it was like what, 20 points for Trump.
Yeah.
So, and speaking of Trump, I mean, we've been on Biden for 15 minutes. Did you want to hit on the Trump situation?
The Trump situation seems to be like jury nullification in reverse. I think that what they're gonna do is they're gonna put him on trial in districts that they know are going to get convictions, regardless of any exculpatory evidence, and that's what they're banking on. Depending on whether or not they fortify the coming election to a sufficient degree, there is a real possibility that Donald Trump could win the presidency from a jail cell.
I wonder what this. I don't even know how you would address that. Does he just pardon himself on the first day, walk out the door?
Yeah. That's exactly what he could do. He obviously isn't going to be put into a prison in general population because, regardless of the circumstances, he is a former president and is entitled to a Secret Service detail for the rest of his life. And the charter for the Secret Service.
I could just see Trump running cell block C or something.
Well, that's what they would basically have to do, is shut everything down, and he would be the only him and his Secret Service detail would be the only residents of a cell block, because it's too dangerous to
orange suit, bandana on,
teardrop tattoo. That would be funny. But yeah, I think that more likely than going to an actual prison, because shutting everything down to a sufficient degree that the Secret Service could actually fulfill their duties of protecting him, I think that probably what they would end up having to do is something like house arrest or something similar to that, which, oh no, I'm stuck in Mar-a-Lago. Whatever will I do? I'm living in paradise. It's like, okay, right. Whatever. But yeah, if he won, he could just pardon himself. There's nothing against that, and that's obviously what he'd end up doing. If he does win, which honestly I hope he does, because I've got a drought of lefty tears. But yeah.
I'm still impartial on Trump, but if he goes to prison, I definitely want him to win, just because that situation is amazing.
Yeah.
To have a president convicted of a crime and then win the presidency, and I would love to see him just pardon himself just for the chaos it would create.
Yeah, well, there's parallels to like what happened down in Brazil. The current president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, was campaigning from a jail cell on corruption charges. So, just to see it in a South American country, you kind of shrug and be like, okay, yeah, it's South America. But for it to happen in the United States, something has gone deeply, deeply wrong.
Well, I think Bongino did a thing on South America and the assassinations they have down there, and he kind of tied it into some of the shit that you hear the rabid progressives saying needs to happen here, as far as calls to violence and whatnot.
Well, you remember last year when they were saying that the rhetoric around everything on the internet was going to lead to stochastic terrorism, where that was the buzzword for all of like 5 minutes before they finally must have come to their senses and realized that, oh shit, the things we've been saying about Trump and his supporters are 10 times worse than anything you're going to get on a 4chan post. So maybe we should just chill it with these accusations of stochastic terrorism. Because when you got fucking CNN anchors out there like, oh, somebody needs to assassinate the president, it's like, bro.
Right. Well, and I thought it was a clickbait article, so I didn't click on it. But I guess Bobby Kennedy Jr. asked for Secret Service protection. It was denied.
Yep.
Now he's reiterated his request for it because he said he was threatened by the Biden campaign. I didn't catch the full story. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it came out earlier today, so I was hoping you saw that. But I mean, it's just crazy that they denied it. I mean, every candidate gets some protection, especially one as well known as him.
Yeah. And I remember when there was just a little bit of a dust up about Gary Johnson getting Secret Service when he won the nomination back in 2016. It's like, yeah, that's what you do when you have a viable presidential candidate, is you get the Secret Service involved. Duh. But anyways,
yeah. I mean, we can hit on international stuff.
Yeah, let's pull Simon in and darken our black pill slightly.
Let me get him going. Simon, do you hear us?
I can hear you fine, guys. Hello.
Did we miss anything? Did we miss anything?
Well, in terms of the Trump stuff, it's quite interesting that the prosecutor has asked for his trial to start. I think it was like the 6th of January next year. So it's like a week before the primaries start. Mm-hmm. And then don't forget, tomorrow there's a special hearing about restricting what Trump can talk about, particularly on social media.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I saw they wanted his Twitter logs too.
No, they've already got those.
Oh, okay.
They've already, yeah. That was a revelation that they had subpoenaed his Twitter account, and Twitter had taken the issue about whether or not they could tell him, since it wasn't a national security warrant. Mm-hmm. And they delayed so long that the judge who was handling the warrant fined them $350,000.
Which is peanuts for somebody like Musk.
I understand, but the point that's worth bearing in mind for when you're sending each other jokes, which might conceivably be in bad taste, is of course they were trying to get all of his Twitter direct messages, not just his public statements.
Oh yeah. So
right.
they were.
So that's what was. Yeah. So that's what was significant there, and we're very much with Trump in an Alex Jones trial situation, where no matter what his lawyers tell him and what the judge tells him again and again and again, he just won't shut up. So, I mean, you've got a real prospect of him just being completely banned from social media during the election campaign, because he just won't keep bad-mouthing the judge and bad-mouthing the prosecutors and bad-mouthing everybody else that he can think of. And that could literally get him, whilst it seems unlikely that it'd be in pre-trial detention, it could certainly get him a ban from social media.
Contempt of court, maybe?
No, that would be the response, would be to say, right, because you keep on violating these court orders, which is condemned, then we're going to say, you can't go on Twitter, you can't go on True Social, you can't go on TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram or anything, basically.
Yeah. And so, that'll kill the campaign.
Right.
Well, I mean, it is.
They're already trying to drain his coffers with all these political.
Yeah, but they're really not, though, because he's getting very big contributions. Mm. So, people are basically crowdfunding all of his legal fees. But did you see the latest poll that came out? The actual sample date was August 1 through August 3, and there's been a hardening up of the Trump support among Republican registered voters, which meant that overall he only dropped 3%. He's now behind Biden. Okay, But the really shocking statistic, and this may bode very, very poorly for his election prospects when you consider the population is now essentially 30, 40, 30. So the actual size of the independents has actually grown significantly over the last 20 years. And he dropped 13% in independence in a month. 13%. And he's toast if that continues for 18 months.
So, speculation time. Do you think that the reason that he had that sort of a drop amongst independents, do you think that's because the independents are just they're seeing that no matter what happens, they're going to just keep coming after him, and they're like, it's just not even worth it to try and get behind him anymore. That they're never going to stop trying to wage lawfare on him, or is there some other reason behind it?
No, because I don't think they feel that they're giving up on him as a candidate, because they'd be registered Republicans if they felt that strongly about the issue. I mean, they're truly politically, I wouldn't say indifferent, but maybe a pox on both their houses would be more appropriate a phrase, particularly in this Pride season. And so he's really got to lock that up, and he did very well with that in 2016. And I think he's got a very, very significant problem there, because when all these talking heads are saying, the more charges they give him, the more donations he get, and the more people love him, that's within the conservative community. That's because they feel like they are directly being threatened, but the independents, I don't think, have that perception. And so, I mean, it's actually astonishing as well how much there's been a turnaround for Biden in terms of people who are happy to see him run again, who are registered Democrats. Like in the over 65 Democratic, people who want him to run for a second time have increased 22% in a month. 22%. Now, I appreciate that that's registered Democrats, but before they were saying, give me like anybody else with a D tagged onto them. And now they're saying, heck no, we'll support Biden. So, I mean, that's just extraordinary, particularly when they've got such a viable candidate as Kennedy.
Well,
but he says a lot that pisses off the establishment Democrats.
Yeah, but, when you say the establishment, they're not traditional Democrats. That's with the Democrat Party having moved so far to the fringe. Their orthodoxy has completely changed. It's like the Lord's Prayer now having to be saying backwards, right?
Right.
And so, but when people have to pull the lever and they've essentially only got two choices, that's the hard flip you're trying to make. And, obviously we know with the mental state of Biden, it's so just appalling that it just goes to show how people will vote for anything with a D on it. And in terms of the crime in the cities, just, very quickly, having listened carefully to your prior conversation, the one thing you didn't mention was the Soros district attorneys.
Yeah.
Now, we've just had the governor, DeSantis, have to step in and for the second time, I think, ever, there was another guy down towards Miami who he removed from office. But he removed an elected state attorney that was essentially responsible for the Orlando metropolitan area because she was dropping 40% of the criminal charges in her area. 40%, over 40%. And the next highest was 22, and that was in Miami. So they were like, we're not just talking crazy Democrat, we're talking like double the next craziest Democrat. And I mean, it ended up that 2 cops were both shot in the face, and it turned out that the guy who shot them had his prior charges dropped by her. And that's what caused all the public attention to this. When people started digging and were looking at her prosecution records, they were like absolutely stunned at how bad it had got. Then all the sheriff's departments piled in and were all lobbying the state attorney general and the governor to intercede. And finally he did. She's obviously claiming that it's all like a political witch hunt and stuff, but I think the data which they laid out very, very clearly yesterday was really unequivocal. But it's very important for people to remember that these down ballot posts, particularly positions like state attorney general and the Supreme Court justices, where they're elected in some states, and the district attorneys, that's why Los Angeles and San Francisco and Portland have all gone into hellholes, because they've got these die-hard Antifa, pro-BLM, revolutionaries who were suddenly given $10 million by Soros and outspent their opponents by, 10 or 20 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And just brought their way into office by name recognition.
Right. And those sorts of activist district attorneys that are letting all of these crimes go, that was the whole purpose behind Giuliani's broken windows policing back in the day, was recidivism leads to your major crimes. It's, the cops used to let people go, like if you get caught with a joint on the street or you jump the turnstile or something like that, then they would just let you go. But they were like, no, the guy that's jumping the turnstile is the guy who's mugging the old lady on the subway, is the guy who's going and committing a rape and an assault and a murder later on that night. Because crime, it turns out, is it's not, when you say like your crime rate is 15%, it's not 15% of your population is committing a crime. It's like 0.15% of the population is committing multiple crimes. And so that was the thing. It's like when you have a bad egg, he's a bad egg, and you need to take him off of the street because he's only going to get worse. So that was the main drive behind.
Well, they tried doing that in California with the 3 strikes law, and it didn't really help the situation. So, that's already been played with. And obviously, courtesy of his daughter, or one of his daughters, Ivanka, obviously Trump did that massive prison and sentencing reform, didn't he? Mm-hmm. So between that and COVID, you saw quite a substantial reduction in the US prison population. Mm-hmm. And, that obviously hasn't helped. But, things are as bad as they are, with unemployment being around 4%. Imagine what officially, I appreciate that data is, heavily manipulated. But imagine if you had like China, where you got like 20% youth unemployment, or Spain, where you've got, 12%, 13% national unemployment and stuff. Can you imagine if you had that? And the unemployment system's been tightened up now post COVID, and the Medicare system's been Medicaid is what I mean.
Right.
Obviously, being eligibility for that's been tightened up. So the whole society is very fragile now. We don't need much of a systemic shock to really push it over the edge at this point, I would say.
We just need one good junta to come through, right?
Yeah, but we don't see much sign of that, unfortunately. It's interesting because talking about Niger, I've been listening to a lot of online conversations and articles about, how you've had so many military coups, particularly in West Africa, in the last 60 years since the real decolonization process started. And some of those, like in Equatorial Guinea, they ended up lasting for decades, but many of them only lasted for a year or two. And they really were to get the super corrupt out of office and try and institute reforms. Mm. And God, do we really need that in America, right? But the problem is obviously Obama heavily politicized the promotion process. you obviously guys were in service during part of that, and now a lot of the people that he gave 1 star to are still there, sitting on their 3rd or 4th star, and we didn't see many of them stand up when people were being mandated to take the jabs, did we?
Yeah.
And the whole service has never really recovered from the 29 Palms survey, and that was 1994, when you had a good proportion of the recruits saying that they'd be willing to open fire on unarmed American citizens if ordered to do so. This whole concept of laws of war and the Geneva Conventions just goes completely out the window. I'm sure you've seen that in Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
Occasionally.
So the prospect of a military takeover in the United States is not one, unlike many of the Trump supporters and ex-Q fans who really relish that with glee. I don't think that would have a particularly pleasant outcome. I think it would descend. it would descend into a really vicious kind of Argentinian or Chilean style, throwing people out of helicopters pretty darn fast.
With the wrong type of people being
So,
thrown out of the helicopter.
Simon, we're getting up at 15 minutes left.
Yeah, sure.
So I'd like to dive in to the Niger thing.
Yeah.
What do you think this is gonna kick off to be?
So the one thing that a few commentators have touched upon, but everyone's pretty reluctant to go there, is the sitting president was an Arab, and Arabs are about 5% of that population there. So everyone questioned his election in the first place. There was belief that there was widespread election fraud instigated by the French to get him elected in the first place. And there was an attempted coup against him days before he was going to be sworn in. So that's very Biden-esque. Okay. I mean, this guy in Niger didn't get 81 million votes, but people were surprised at how many he did get. And so this is the second coup attempt in that country. So you've got the racial element. The other thing that hasn't really been understood, because everyone's thinking that it's kind of this kind of overwhelming anti-French sentiment, which definitely plays part of it. But because he felt very vulnerable in his position, he was going through a process much like Obama of replacing all of the senior leadership of the military. And he had replaced the head of the Air Force, he had replaced the head of the army, even though these were people who had served his predecessor, who had actually supported his election. So they weren't like they'd been put in there by the opposition leaders and they therefore naturally hated him. Okay? He was just, I need to put my own personal people into all the top positions in order to avert the possibility of there being another coup. Now, obviously, the Americans have been plowing vast amounts of military assistance support. And there's been a lot of criticism. There was an Inspector General investigation, Army Inspector General, because there have been lots of reports that even though they were there in theory in a advise and assist capacity, that there had actually been lots of non-partnered direct action missions, particularly using drones. Okay? And that wasn't why, in theory, people were there, but obviously they felt that they needed to get their money's worth, having spent $110 million on building an airfield in much the same way as they spent that incredible amount of money on Bagram before they fled. Okay? So in that regard, it's very, very similar to Afghanistan. Okay? When you were talking about your second ex-French colony, obviously you had intentionally omitted the American involvement in Haiti during the Clinton administration.
Yeah, we forgot about that one.
Yeah.
So,
3 nickels then.
So unfortunately, the French are pretty toxic, though it does appear that they're throwing about their special forces already, and it looks like they flew a mission out of Chad attacked a Niger prison and released 16 militant, high-ranking leaders for an organization. You know, you've got ISIS there, and you've also got other Sahel groups, because that region kind of like is very much like Kurdistan. There's lots of similarities with other world conflicts. So you've got these militants who basically want like an independent Sahel that would be like part of Algeria, part of Libya, part of Burkina Faso, part of Niger, and part of Mali. Okay, so I mean, in Mali, for example, the government controls about 60% of the landmass. So these are societies that are fraught with problems. Now, we've had the what's called ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community of the West African States. It's an acronym you're going to hear very frequently.
The old ECOWAS.
ECOWAS. Yeah, that is a name you're going to hear a lot. Now, they have what's called a standby force. Now, there's the African Standby Force, which is under the aegis of the African Union. That's split up into regions. ECOWAS is 15 countries, 4 of which are currently suspended. Okay.
Well,
now,
and it's 15 countries, but there's been other countries that sided with Niger. Hasn't that been coming out?
Yeah. So 4 of them are suspended out of the 15. Okay. And 3 of them have said that they'll treat an attack on Niger as an act of war against them. And you're looking at a potential, at least to start off with, 4 countries versus 4 countries. I mean, there are lots of African commentators talking about a pan-African war.
Yeah, because
now
if
those 4 countries between them have.
I was going to say, if what I read was correct, you've got countries like Burkina Faso and Mali are siding with the ousted president, and then you've got some of the other countries around there saying that if these countries try to invade Niger to overthrow the military junta, they're going to see that as an act of war against them. So you got like some people are siding with the military junta, some are siding with the ousted president, and it's going to be like almost like if the region was a single federated state or something, it'd be like a civil war. But this is like sovereign nation states that are going to go to war with each other, right?
Well, ECOWAS essentially is a federation, and in theory was on a path of further integration. So they've had a summit of defense ministers where they agreed that they would intervene. They said that they were going to send 25,000 troops, and they named the main base. In theory, they even named the general who was going to lead it. 4 countries, which were Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Benin, and I believe Senegal, said that they were going to contribute troops. Senegal itself is on the verge of a civil war. They've had widespread civil disruptions and riots for over a week about government corruption and cost of living increases. The countries that you mentioned, they're actually on the other side. So you had Burkina Faso, who's obviously got their own military junta and control, Mali the same, Guinea the same, and now Niger. So Niger was the 8th military coup in this region within 3 years. Okay? So that's not to say that it was applying to all of the countries, but it was 8 amongst 4 or 5 countries over the space of 3 years. And the president of Nigeria, who's the rotating president of ECOWAS, went to his national senate like you'd go to the US Congress for a declaration of war, in theory, if one weren't using the War Powers Act, right? And sought permission to invade Nigeria and was told no. But what happened is that in the floor debate, he was told in no uncertain terms whatsoever, particularly from the senators of the border states, because there's 7 Nigerian states that are up against the Niger border, which is a very heavily populated area.
Mm-hmm.
And so they then went into closed session. Then the Senate president came out, and 2 amazing things happened. One, he read out a statement saying, we were never asked to declare war in the first place, which was clearly untrue, right? It was just ridiculous, because that was the whole point of the session, was uniquely to debate and decide that issue. So if they weren't asked to do that, they didn't need to be in the building, okay? Right. And the second thing that really shocked me when I actually read the transcript or the text of the written resolution, as opposed to the verbal conclusion of the debate, was that it required and requested the national president to use politics and diplomacy, quote, and any other means to resolve the dispute. So, of course, he then seized upon the phrase, any other means, summoned all the other presidents together, and they then put out a contradictory statement today, not only okaying the immediate mobilization of the ECOWAS standing force that only has a few thousand troops on immediate standby. Then there's a main force, much like in NATO, where divisions are assigned, but they're not in the kind of high readiness task force. So they're not like the 101st and the 82nd Airborne. That would be the American equivalent, right? Where those guys are always, ready on like 3 days' notice to deploy.
Yeah.
So, so that other resolution said, call up these guys, deploy them to the forward bases, but still use diplomacy. Now, the response to that was from the military junta, who during the course of the day had actually appointed a full alternate cabinet. So they brought in the country's top economist, who had been on assignment with the African Development Bank in Chad, which is the country just to the east of them. Okay, they flew him back. He surprisingly agreed to become prime minister. They then announced a 21-member civilian cabinet. So to all intents and purposes, there's now an entirely civilian government in place. Okay? And they then said, if you invade us, the first person to die is going to be the former president.
Oh, what a shit show.
So
that seemed to have the opposite effect of what they wanted.
And the military junta, there are organizations that do polling. It has to be street polling, so one has to question, how reliable that is. I don't know what the presence of kind of, Ukrainian-style street-based Secret Service monitors is like. Try taking a street poll in Iran or somewhere. You're not going to get a very honest answer. That is indicating 80% support for the junta, because they didn't like this guy because he was Arab. People suspected that he wasn't fairly elected, and they hate the French who are supporting him. So even if he wasn't killed, could he actually really administer the country? Now, it wasn't the whole military that turned against him. The actual force that turned against him, ironically, was the presidential guard. Now, he locked himself in a safe room in the presidential palace, and unbelievably, he's been in the safe room for a week. And he's had a cell phone that he's been calling out from, speaking to various ambassadors. And that, in theory, was how he dictated a story to his ambassador in America, who handed it to the Washington Post. Now, one might argue, given the Bezos connection, that was simply scripted by the CIA and they instructed them to publish it. But whether or not it was him talking from his safe room or whether or not some CIA officer wrote it still, begged for assistance. And so that's the basis upon which the European Union and ECOWAS are attempting to intervene, saying, well, the constitutionally elected president has personally, from his, one bar, can you hear me now, self room, in his safe room, begging for help. Now, in theory, tonight, he's being moved to like a regular prison, just like Imran Khan in Pakistan has been put into a regular prison. There's similarities between Imran Khan, obviously, and Trump, because by the time he got convicted on selling state gifts, including like some necklaces and some Rolexes, which is what he got sent away from 3 years on, and he got sent to a maximum security prison, not a level A camp in Pakistan, right? He's not in a cell with 20 people, but he's in maximum security prison. One has to wonder with Trump whether or not they could say that he'd be safest in a communications management unit in solitary confinement, so that he can't be on his cell phone releasing all the national secrets that he ran away with and stored in his bathroom. If he were any other person, they'd have a very, very strong grounds for doing that. If they get Assange extradited to the United States, or if they ever got Snowden back, they would go straight into a dark hole and never be heard from again for 20 years.
So what if ECOWAS rolls in there? I mean, what's the outcome of that?
The outcome is going to be already they've closed the road from Benin and from Nigeria, and so that's causing really major problems for aid shipments. So like the World Food Programme, Cindy McCain was online today saying that none of their food trucks, even to the refugee camps that exist in the country, can cross the border. It's a hard shutdown. They've shut down all financial transactions. America and the EU have shut off all of their aid. The Chinese were building a pipeline and a massive dam. The pipeline was a $4 billion project and the dam was a $900 million project. Those have both been suspended and they're laying off all of the construction workers as we speak. So it's actually having a really, really major impact upon the country. They also shut down all of the electricity. They were getting something like 80% of their electricity from Nigeria. That's been shut off. And as it was something like, I was reading, it was unclear whether it was like 20 or 25% of the country even had access to regular metered electricity as opposed to generators. So, I mean, this was the second poorest country in the world. So they don't have a great deal of resources. The only thing they're really standing on at this point is national pride. But hell, that stood the Texans in good order when the time came, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what would be the outcome that they would expect? They just their neighbors would move in there, kick out the junta, and all go back to being happy and sunshine again? Or
well, that assumes that the president hasn't been killed in the process.
Sure.
Right? Half the cabinet has been the previous cabinet has been arrested, and in theory they're forcing the finance minister to kind of like say, where the hell's this gone and that gone and this gone, which once again we would love to see happen in the United States with having the Fed audited. Right? So, I mean, that's why some of these issues there's a lot of popular support for. But the question that you've asked was exactly the one the Nigerian summit raised. What is the end game? How is there any good outcome of a military intervention? We kill 1 million people and we end up in warfare for 20 years. How does that help anyone?
Yeah.
for the sake of one Arab guy that nobody wanted in the first place.
It's good to see that the Nigerian government has a little bit more prescience than the American government when it comes to
it's not the government, it was the Senate. Yeah, it was the Senate. But see, that was the interesting thing. He was required to ask them. Where obviously in the United States, you've got the War Powers Act. So you can deploy what is it, 60 days, 90 days? Remind me, 60 days?
Or however
without
long
having congressional approval, right?
Yeah.
Or however long they want, relying upon like emergency powers granted to Bush, in like 2002 or something.
Yeah.
So, and when they had the opportunity to cancel those, you'll recall a couple of months ago, did the US Congress cancel those 20-year-old emergency authorizations?
No, just keep extending
No, they did not.
Keep extending it.
Well, they didn't have to extend those ones. They never ended.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had to actually cancel them. So, I mean, it is, and I said this when I was on the George Galloway show yesterday. Funnily enough, that was the 16th time I've been on that show this year. That's 3 million viewers. That's quite a big show. And I was saying, look and compare to Australia, where their government has just specifically said we will not have a vote in Parliament if we choose to deploy forces in response to an attack on Taiwan.
Mm-hmm. Man, we're getting into some weeds.
I mean,
here.
what do you predict? What do you predict we'll be talking about next week on Niger then, Simon?
Well, I appreciate you guys, want to go to bed and got, kids and stuff to look after, so we can truncate this as much as you like. But since you just asked me the direct question, the issue now is there was a widespread perception that the countries that offered to intervene, of which there were only 4 out of the 11 who were not part of the original 4 who had coups, now they're no longer just threatening, they're literally being told, send a brigade here. That's an entirely different scenario. Okay? So the kind of numbers that Ivory Coast, for example, that was seen as potentially being the second largest contributor, they immediately said today, bearing in mind that the original number was 25,000, okay? The entire Nigerian armed forces are 250,000. It's widespread corruption, and they've got their own massive insurgency that they're dealing with, not successfully. Mm-hmm. Okay, and their currency has had a meltdown. Their currency went through 1,000 naira to the dollar, which is its weakest ever. Okay, so the markets locally, because that's on the black market, the domestic market clearly is not confident about the outcome of this potential intervention. Okay, and so the Ivory Coast was saying that they could get ready 850 to 1,000 troops. So that's less than 4% of the initially requested amount. Okay, bearing in mind they're the second largest nation of ECOWAS. As soon as possible. They didn't even say next month or next week. Mm. So that's like a reinforced battalion. Mm-hmm. Okay, so where are the other 24,000 going to come from? Then you've got to start looking at casualties. Where are the casualty replacements going to come from? Okay, is he going to be able to hold the Nigerian government together? Because a lawsuit has already been filed to try and prevent the Nigerian government from doing this deployment without having its own Senate resolution. So, but God knows how long that will take. It tends to be very slow wheels of justice in that part of the world. And will he be able to throw in 20,000 troops in a couple of weeks? And even, the Washington think tanks, I was reading lots of them today, even though I vehemently disagree with most of their outcomes. It's just literally kind of civilian propaganda. But they were still saying overturning a coup, you have like a golden day or two, like, you know, with combat medics, where they talk about the golden hour to get you to the field hospital, right? And they're saying that, you know, obviously once officers who aren't willing to participate with the coup have been removed and replaced, and you've got unit cohesion back again, and you've re-established regular communications and stuff, that actually removing that force, who obviously know their local environment perfectly. They know all the alleyways and all the sewers and where all the power switches are and all that kind of stuff. And your guys are going in cold. It's very, very hard after a couple of days. We're now looking at that we're into week 2. And are they going to pull this 25,000 together in another 2 weeks or in a month? Because even when this group was envisaged, which was about 15 years or so ago, I mean, it was originally founded in 1999, but didn't really get up and running until about 2007-8. It was initially going to have 3,000 at high readiness, 6,000 on short notice, and then like 15,000 that would have to be reassigned. Okay, so when we talk about 25,000, that's like 8 times their high readiness force. And then you're talking about contributions from many different countries. So you've got to weave together the command structure, since they haven't been regularly drilling together. Now, ironically, the guy who's now the leader of the junta in Niger, who was previously the commander of the Presidential Guard, he's actually commanded African peacekeeping units. And 5 of the coup leaders had all been on military training courses in the United States in recent years.
So this sounds like, you know, this is going to be more of a permanent thing. I mean, you make a good point that if they don't kick them out right away, they start to gain some legitimacy, and, you know, the population probably starts to get behind them.
So I think the real question here is 2 things. One, you risk a regional war, like a real big scale war, very First World War like we've seen in between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And then the second thing is whether or not the governments in the countries supplying the intervening forces can sustain any level of public support. Well, Senegal's on the verge of collapsing. Togo's got a dictator who flies every other weekend in like a Boeing 737 to his villa in Milan. You've already had 4 countries that have rebelled. Nigeria and Libya, immediately to the north of Niger with land borders, have said that they don't like the unconstitutional arrangements, but that they don't want to see military intervention. So when push comes to shove, are they actually just going to express their displeasure, or are they going to pick a side? And then if the European Union starts applying sanctions to all of these other countries that join the side of Niger, then are they going to sanction Chad? Are they going to sanction Libya? Are they going to sanction Algeria? And in doing so, cut off all the energy supplies that go from Libya and Algeria into Spain and Italy and France as we go into the fall.
Well, also not to mention,
I mean, this thing can potentially.
Well, I was going to say the amount of refugees that would be coming up. I mean, it's bad now, but that's right.
A lot of the population on the border, they already are refugees. So it's like southern Lebanon, where there's a profusion of refugee camps. But they're all the same ethnic tribe. They're all Hausa, Hausa. And that's the problem. If they take the troops from northern Nigeria, they're literally asking them to kill their ethnic counterparts who go to the same markets and are intermarried, but not even different religions or different tribes, like you had in Bosnia. They're all the same people that some British bureaucrat drew a line through.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're asking them to fight for the French,
which they know they don't
that's
really like.
Ask.
So at
then
this
if
point,
you send troops from southern Nigeria, you're sending them from a different tribe. The whole of Nigeria has already been on the verge of a civil war. So then you get a situation where you're basically asking, Catholics to kill Muslims or something. And you're expecting both of the groups of Muslims to not band together against the Catholics in this hypothetical situation. That seems absurd. Now, I appreciate that happened with various payments during the Crusades, but this is my point, and I know I always go over, but I am answering your questions. Is once again, the American population, just like the whole Sunni and Shia situation in Iraq wasn't adequately explained to them, aren't really being explained the complexities of this situation. And I think very few people really understand the degree of American involvement there and the degree of colonial overhang from the French government. People understand a bit about the uranium mines, but there's gold mines there as well, and there's oil. Mm-hmm. And the Chinese are up to their necks in this place. They're trying to build all this infrastructure because they want them to increase by fourfold their oil exports and for it all to go under contract to China. But the country's landlocked, so they have to have a pipeline go through Benin. And now Benin's on one side and Niger's on the other side of this dispute. Chinese we've got thousands of guys there and a pipeline that's 3/4 built, and that's $4.5 billion. So they're just getting out of there. But these are a big, for these kind of countries, $4 billion is a big amount, right? I know in America that's a couple of minutes, kind of over taxation by the Biden administration or something. But in Africa, that buys you quite a few parcels of real estate. So that's where we're at. I don't want to keep you awake all night. I'm bearing in mind I'm an hour ahead of you anyway, and I've almost run out of wine. So if you want to revisit this in a week or so, or 2 weeks or so, you're more than welcome to call upon me. I mean, interestingly enough, as I was saying when I was on with Harrison, what was that, Tuesday? We've got the BRICS summit is just in 12 days time, 12 days from today. And the two things on their agenda are a massive expansion of the membership and de-dollarization. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be on the Galloway show on the 23rd. I'm going to be on TNT Radio on the 24th. I'm going to be doing my own show with Jason Olbourne on Rumble on the 25th. But if you like, I could maybe talk to you after the Hervé Moritz show on the 24th or something. That's Thursday in 2 weeks' time. So that's the last day of the BRICS summit, and then we'll know how many countries that's been expanded to. Because the big issue there is Iran is trying really, really hard to get into that group, but so is Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. So if they get in with Iran, you've got an incredible concentration of the world's oil and gas resources suddenly ending up in that organization. And that,
I mean, that'd be a
because of
good
all the other
follow up
stuff
in 2
going on
weeks to
domestically. People
talk
really
about
aren't paying
that
a lot
in
of attention to
Niger.
that. But I mean, this is happening at the same time. The preparation for that is happening at the same time. The Iranians sent a huge delegation today. There's 13 ministers in South Africa now. 13. Can you imagine? I mean, there's one minister and 12 deputy ministers, but even so, that's an incredible delegation 2 weeks before the actual summit, because they always try and tie these things up in advance. And then during the actual summit, normally that's just a press kind of thing for all the presidents to shake hand, go down to the sex dungeon and then, put out some group photos when they clean themselves up. And so, they've obviously, if they've sent 13 guys, they're working on some pretty big deals, right?
Yeah.
Big deals.
Anyway, like I said, you're welcome to call on me if you want. It'll be interesting. Not that I'm suggesting that you'll do anything tomorrow, but it'll be interesting to see what happens to Trump tomorrow, how he reacts, and if that immediate reaction causes his lawyers to be sanctioned and even more restrictions to be placed upon him the following week. Because you can imagine how crazy he'll go if he gets told that he can't talk about the case on social media.
Right.
So if he starts threatening people or calling people names or whatever,
yeah,
they're gonna send a video of that to the judge literally like on Monday morning, and she's gonna say this is contempt.
Don't care.
And it's going to be like that every week for months.
Oh boy. Well, let's pick this up some other time.
Thanks
for joining us, Simon.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, I've said that 3 or 4 times. You asked me more questions.
All right.
Well, we went over an hour talking about Niger. Well, I guess next week we'll watch what happens in Niger if Biden screws up saying Niger on public television. And if Trump gets kicked off all social media. So thanks for joining us. We had a bunch of people pop in over on Rumble. Somebody named White House Grandpa brought his fans in to watch the show. Not sure what that was about, but thanks for joining us. We'll be back same time next week if you guys want to catch us in. So we're heading out and stay honky.